Nice to meet you. Wow, see, you're the wife. You're exactly as I imagined. The woman my husband suddenly brought home stares at me rudely, making me feel uncomfortable. My husband introduces her as the woman he loves. Ignoring my shock, she dreamily talks about how my husband came to her aid when she was in trouble. Right after listening to her story with pride, my husband presents me with an unthinkable choice. Before getting married, I, Sarah, lived with my Aunt Heather. She took me in after my parents passed away when I was a child. She's never shown a hint of annoyance, and she's essentially my second mom. We have lived apart since I got married, but I assist with her work as I do mine from home. I married Victor, who was 2 years older and 35. Back when we were dating, he was a nice guy, always impeccably dressed in his suit, and thoughtful enough to help out around the house when he knew I was tired. I use the past tense because he's not the man I married. After the wedding, he transformed into a tyrant, a complete stranger. In public, he plays the part of a gentle husband, but alone with me, he treats me like a servant. He used to say housework is a shared responsibility, but now he doesn't lift a finger and treats me like a housekeeper. One day I had to go out suddenly due to an urgent work-related call. I returned home completely exhausted, and Victor, who was waiting in the living room, was furious. "Where have you been all this time?" he asked. "I come home tired from work, and you haven't even prepared dinner or a bath. How useless can you be? You were raised by your single aunt, so you know nothing about being a devoted wife." Despite letting Victor know I'd be out for an emergency and uncertain when I'd return, he's like this. I held back my response to avoid further upsetting him. Even though I had seen that he read my message, I thought to myself, Victor can handle his own meals and bath, but he insists on complaining instead. "What's with that look?" I asked. "If you have something to say, say it. Were you lying about work? Are you seeing another guy behind my back?" Once Victor starts to get angry, there's no calming him down. If I try to defend myself now, he'll only get more heated. Even as I apologize and start preparing dinner, he keeps accusing me of cheating, of not fulfilling my role as a housewife. By the next morning, he's treating me like I don't exist. I say good morning, and he ignores me. He doesn't touch the breakfast or lunch I prepare. To avoid complaints, he leaves for work without saying a word, and comes home to yell about no dinner or bath. I was already fed up with this petty, unreasonable behavior. My husband's behavior made me seriously consider a divorce. A month passed quickly as I began packing and looking for a new place. One day Victor came home early with a woman. Knowing that he was polite to others, I was relieved, thinking he wouldn't yell at me in front of her. The woman walked in and boldly, without hesitation, looked at me and smirked. "Hi, I'm Rebecca." There were many things I wanted to comment on, but instead I simply introduced myself as Victor's wife. "Oh, you're the wife," she said, just as I imagined. Exactly how Victor told me you'd be. Feeling uncomfortable under Rebecca's invasive gaze, I turned to Victor. "If you're bringing a work colleague home, I'd appreciate a heads up," I said. The room fell silent. Finally, Victor spoke, and it was not what I expected. "She's the woman I truly love, not like you. She's special and deserves my real affection. She's moving in. Pack your things and leave." I was lost for words, ignoring my reaction. Victor dreamily looked at Rebecca. Unfortunately, Rebecca's house burned down a month ago. She's been staying with friends or at hotels, but then I realized she could stay here with me. Leaning on Victor's arm, Rebecca nodded, adding her voice to his nonsense. As I stood there, dumbfounded, wondering what was happening, Victor looked down at me and said, "Well, it's gotta be tough being told to leave out of the blue. If you serve us as a housekeeper, you can stay. I'm a generous guy. I'll even let you sleep here as long as you work. So choose, leave or work as a housekeeper. What will it be?" Victor and Rebecca were clearly mocking me. I declared, "I'm leaving. Let's get a divorce." Without any hesitation, I handed Victor the already filled-out divorce papers I had prepared in advance. Victor, showing a moment of surprise, then exchanged a smug look with Rebecca and taunted me. "Not bad, finally showing some initiative. If you were always like this, I never would have dumped you." As he said this, Victor eagerly began filling out his part of the divorce papers. Taking the opportunity, I presented Rebecca with another set of documents. "These are the damage claims for the recent fire. Please review them." Rebecca froze, puzzled by my sudden mention of the fire, muttering a small ha. You see, Rebecca and I had met once before, years ago. I was the landlord of an apartment that my aunt had put me in charge of, and Rebecca had been one of the tenants. So the house she claimed burned down was actually one of my apartments. The altercation she had with Victor a month ago was due to this very fire, and the investigation found that the fire had started in Rebecca's room because she was smoking in bed. I had been consulting with the police, the fire department, and insurance companies for damage estimates and claims. During this time, Rebecca had changed her contact information and disappeared. I learned that her father, who was her guarantor, had passed away after the contract was signed. Even her mother seemed to have sold their home and moved away after contacting Rebecca's place of employment. I found out she had already been fired due to frequent unexcused absences. I couldn't reach her guarantor or her employer, so it seemed like she had vanished. I had been considering steps like asking for her social security number, filing a missing person report with the police, and even resorting to a public notice for disposing of her belongings. But I never expected her to show up on her own. While I was unaware of her affair with Victor, this certainly sped things up. I explained to Rebecca, who still seemed to not understand the situation, that I was demanding overdue rent and damages due to her severe negligence that caused the fire. So the initial amount for the fire damages, which was originally set at $3,420, was doubled to $6,840 after she tried to flee. Naturally, I also insisted on receiving a security deposit for the damages. Rebecca started to panic and suddenly began making excuses about the fire. She claimed she had properly put out the cigarette, but maybe it was my oversight that it didn't go out. However, even if it was a minor fault, insurance should cover it, right? Also, my room had a lot of clothes and paper bags from department stores, so it caught fire easily. But who would expect it to be so flammable? Rebecca's new testimony was completely different from her initial one, admitting she didn't understand the risk. No matter how much she tried to make excuses now, the documentation I have gathered over the past month is solid. She couldn't evade payment, as I pointed out each document and recounted her past statements. Rebecca finally seemed to understand that she couldn't overturn the facts and was visibly stunned. Victor, taking Rebecca's place, slammed the table and shouted at me, "How heartless can you be? Rebecca almost died in that fire, and she lost her home. It's her own doing." I even avoided immediate claims for compensation, considering she might need money for treatment and relocation. "You're the ones who took advantage of my kindness to run," I said. "Besides, the real victims are the innocent residents of the other apartments who lost their homes." Apparently at a loss for words, Victor started insulting me, saying I have a terrible personality, and even that my cooking is bad. It was amusing to me and strangely reassuring. We who were once friends are now enemies. Once married, I realized there was not a shred of love left between us. Naturally, I also informed Victor that I would be demanding a security deposit from him for the affair. Stunned by the word security deposit, Victor gaped at me with a dumbfounded expression. Perhaps he thought that the issue was settled in his favor because I chose to leave. One would think that he would expect to also be billed when Rebecca was. When I added that I would inform him of the amount later, Victor glared at me with bloodshot eyes. "It's all about money with you. How greedy can you be?" I said, facing his ultimatum. "Unbelievable. Let's go." Victor, in a huff, stormed out of the house, dragging the still dumbfounded Rebecca with him. I checked the divorce papers Victor left behind to ensure everything was filled out correctly and quickly moved on to my next step. Victor, who had stormed out barefoot and empty-handed, unsurprisingly returned within 2 days. He had left all his essentials behind, so I knew he would be back. During this period, I had gathered all the evidence of the affair, and I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip. I told Victor that I was recording our conversation and warned him not to cause a scene. Then I once again insisted that he pay me a security deposit for all his nasty comments and his affair. "If you won't pay, I'll get a lawyer and take this to court," I said, facing his ultimatum. Victor agreed to pay me on the spot. I had been gathering evidence of his abusive language since I started thinking about divorce. I had these recordings as a safety net for divorce discussions, but they came in handy now. The agreement I drafted included several conditions, such as admitting to the affair and future payments of the security deposit. Victor signed it while begrudgingly muttering that I was a gold digger, but he seemed desperate to avoid a public scandal. After securing his promise, I kicked Victor out of the apartment I had rented. He didn't have enough money for a new place, so he was apparently sleeping in hotels and internet cafes. However, the easygoing life doesn't last, and soon enough, his savings were gone. He returned to his parents for help, though he didn't tell them about the divorce, only saying that we had a big fight, and I kicked him out. His parents already knew the whole story. I had filled them in when I sent Victor's belongings back to them. Victor's parents were outraged by his actions. Disowned by his family, Victor turned up at Rebecca's apartment. He thought he could easily crash there, but things didn't go as planned. Rebecca blamed Victor for the additional damages she had to pay because of his actions and broke up with him on the spot. They had a massive fight that was so loud their neighbors reported them. The person who reported us turned out to be our neighbor, and unfortunately he was Victor's new boss, who had just been transferred to headquarters. He was only living in this apartment temporarily for a month, until company housing became available. Ironically, he was planning to move out just next week. When the police separated Rebecca and Victor, he recognized his boss and blanched. I was shocked to find out that the source of the ferocious yelling was Victor, who usually was mild-mannered around me. His boss seemed to have felt that Victor's extreme yelling raised some serious concerns about his character. As a result, the promotion that was almost in the bag was withdrawn with a note to keep a closer eye on how he treats his subordinates. Meanwhile, Rebecca found herself in hot water. The colleagues at her new job who recommended the apartment found out about the police ordeal. It wasn't just a nuisance for the neighborhood. She was implicated in infidelity and held responsible for damages from the fire. Needless to say, they withdrew her job offer. Both she and her partner blamed me for their troubles and showed up at my door, screaming and pounding away. I didn't bother to unlock the door. I just called the police. Being the cowards they are, the two hightailed it as soon as they heard the police sirens. A few days later, I was surprised to receive full payment from Rebecca for both the damages and the deposit, as I suspected she might skip town. I did some digging and found out that her new affair partner was the one who provided the money. I wasn't about to let her off the hook. I had a plan to send her new lover a gift. It turns out the man is a business owner who felt sorry for poor, homeless Rebecca and had given her a substantial amount of money. I mailed him the same legal documents I had sent to the insurance company and my lawyer, along with proof of her deceit, all accidentally included with some promotional flyers. The call for fact-checking came just a few days after the mail was sent. A man who fully believed Rebecca's lies, that she was a victim of fire damage but was being unfairly charged due to a loophole in the law, was furious when he found out the truth. He demanded Rebecca fix their relationship and repay the money he had lent her. Lawyers and private investigators got involved right away, and they found out everything from her contact information to the job she was applying for. Rebecca, now without anyone to help her, turned to Victor, who she thought was rebuilding his life. He didn't entertain her plea. Victor has been making payments to me, while Rebecca has been slowly paying off her former lover. The company president, after discussing with my aunt, decided to take this opportunity to rebuild the apartment that burned down. The old apartment, which had low rent, was renovated with. The apartment has been revamped with security enhancements such as entryway monitors and cameras in common spaces, as well as a stylish exterior. While some previous tenants have returned, the main tenants are now students. This is thanks to the nearby college and its convenient location, which has attracted students from rural areas to my apartment. The high security features have made it popular not only among students, but also their parents. Despite an increase in rent, the apartment continues to maintain a steady occupancy rate.